Hannah did her degree at geography at University of Newcastle and her master's in structural geology and geophysics at the University of Leeds, and has now got an awesome new job as mapping officer for Devon and Cornwall Police, which she starts in January. And today she'll be presenting on the Corbetti Geothermal System in Ethiopia, which was her thesis topic. So take it away.
Hi everyone, I hope you can hear me okay. I think there might be some audio issues, but I hope you can hear me. So yeah, my thesis was producing structural and heat source models and power capacity estimates for the Corbetti Geothermal Reservoir in Ethiopia. Here we go. So just a little bit of motivation about my talk. So there's inequalities in access to electricity globally, but in Ethiopia, 66% of the population don't have access to the national grid. And geothermal has the potential to increase this electricity availability and reduce energy insecurity for the national scale. But then on the local scale, it has employment opportunities and reducing reliance on conventional methods. Untitled, which is already operational in Ethiopia, and Tuamoy, which is expected to be operational, demonstrate a promising start for geothermal exploration in Ethiopia. So the aim of my talk is to demonstrate how I constrained the conceptual model for the Corbetti Reservoir and to discuss the reservoir's resource capacity and weather trajectories. I talked about Corbetti Geothermal for the data that they provided. So Corbetti is here, the yellow caldera, and it sits within the main Ethiopian rift, which extension began along the border faults and has since localised to the Wandji fault belt, which presents itself as asymmetric basins and on echelon faults, and it's spreading at a rate of roughly 5 to 6 millimetres a year. So this is Corbetti, and then Eluto Langano is here, and then Tuamoy is just up here to the north. So this is my final reservoir model, which I think I've just shown now, and then as I go throughout the talk, hopefully you can see as I build up the kind of the little sections, and then I'll come back and show this again at the end. So I started off with some local cross-section analysis. So I undertook a cross-section north-south and east-west to kind of just get a really basic idea of the structure that was present within the caldera. I just came up with basic fill scenarios and 190% volcanic fill and 160% volcanic fill, and I got the surface lithologies from the geological map which was produced in 2016, and then the faults are inferred from surface data and resistivity data. So moving on to the faults, I was given a local data set and a regional data set, and then I used so the two theories, so that in extensional regimes you have a positive relationship between the length of a fault and the displacement of a fault, so the depth at which the fault will reach to, and then combining that with this data from Valentine this year, they identified in some Icelandic studies that the resurfacing of a fault throughout time will fracture as small surface fractures and eventually represent the deeper fault at depth. So this was the idea that I tried to take forward into my analysis and try to kind of combine these smaller surface lineations into maybe a larger fault, and then combine those with the regional faults which aren't present across Corbetti because of the most recent deposit. So the aim is to find and identify possible varied regional faults and then understand if they can reach the reservoir region to compartmentalise it or act as drilling targets. So I put the fault lineation data into a software called FlatPath, and you can apply a region, just any stress field to it. So I went for a regional stress field where sigma 3, so the minimum horizontal compressive stress was at 112 degrees. And the results showed that faults trending roughly north-south and most likely to most likely to dilate and act as potential drilling targets, while those trending east-west or northwest, northwest southeast are least likely to dilate. And then this figure is the final kind of highly confident regional fault data set stretching across the caldera, which I produced. Then I incorporated some geochemical data. So this was to kind of get an understanding of the geothermal reservoir beneath the caldera and kind of where it is situated within here. And you can see that most of the work is concentrated on urging, but there is difficult terrain around Chadley, so I think that's mainly why exploration and studies haven't kind of stretched over to Chadley. So my next step was to look at, so after doing kind of surface analysis, it was to look at the subsurface, and I was given, I got 2 microseismicity data sets, and I'm just looking at the most recent one for this talk. So this is just looking at the data in Leapfrog and then in ArcGIS here. So I started off by colouring the data by time, and to kind of see if there's any temporal or spatial patterns in the data. And this is what I identified, and it hasn't previously been identified in this data set before, I don't think, that there was a shift in time and space from below Lake Owata to the south of Corbetti to the more shallow subsurface of Lake Owata to the more shallow subsurface of Corbetti. And I thought this could maybe be due to kind of magma movement or fluid movement, or maybe just completely unrelated to the caldera, just kind of regional stresses. So after kind of just analysing the data from Leapfrog, I wanted to put in some observational planes because it's quite hard to gauge the patterns in Leapfrog, just kind of looking at it with the points. So I put these observational planes in to constrain the patterns that I was seeing, and as you can see here, this observational plane running north-south really nicely divides the data, the microseismicity between beneath Urge and Chadley. And then after kind of a bit more analysis, I thought that this shallower region here, which is also this region here, could be a damage zone and is reacting to maybe a more ductile heat source below. And I thought this region, which has got minor seismicity in, would be representative of a heat source. And the location actually is a similar location to a deformation source identified by Lloyd et al. In 2018. And they brought that because there's been cyclical deformation where there's been periods of uplift and subsidence over the past couple of decades, that there is a deformation source kind of a filling and then a subsequent emptying of a magma or heat source. And this is why it kind of supports my heat source location here. So then moving on to the resistivity data. I got resistivity data and I largely used it for the more regional modelling of my thesis, but for the reservoir modelling, I used it for the isotherms that you can get from resistivity data, so the temperature contours. Oh, yeah, there we go. So these are the surfaces that I produced. So the top one is a 100-degree surface, then 250 degree, and finally 300 degree surface. And the final one is probably, well, it was only present on one cross section, so it's largely my interpretation, and therefore it does contain some uncertainty associated with that surface. But the other two are quite solid as they were present on every cross section that I had available. So I wanted to show you some of the modelling which I came across and just kind of had to choose between to kind of come to my final decisions. I had the 60% and the 90% kind of those scenarios which I showed earlier on. And then these fault planes here, so this is to kind of show that you could constrain this kind of damage zone of microseismicity with different geometries of planes, and it would still constrain the data the same. And I decided to go with the green set of planes, and I felt this demonstrated just the way that the data was kind of situated in 3D. I went with those, and they kind of go towards making the fault planes, which we'll see on the next slide. And then these final two figures are about the caldera ring fault. So I didn't really have much data to constrain the ring fault, and it was so the surface fault lineation was only present on the darker purple one that you can see, so it wasn't present on the eastern side. And so I made this darker purple plane from the surface lineation, and in spin modeling in 2005 by Anahan and Patel, they said that it's generally the planes are steeper when they are parallel to the width, or they're perpendicular to the minimum horizontal stress. So that's what I did with this plane, this dark purple plane. So I put the western side is steeper and the northern and southern sides is shallower, and it produced this gradually sloping plane, which is indicative of a trapdoor style mechanism, and that's what Lloyd-Tyne 2018 suggested to be the collapse mechanism for the Corbetti caldera. And I'm looking at the second plane, so that was constructed from a whole surface fault, and I just set the dip of the fault as consistent the whole way around, and it reaches the heat source, which is here from microseismicity data. And this has, so in that ring down in Iceland, where the caldera ring fault has been identified through microseismicity data, it actually reaches the heat source there as well. So I think both planes are plausible for the caldera ring fault, but without any further data, I would struggle to kind of give a definitive answer or model to which would be correct. Then, so moving on to the fault plane, so this is the data, so this is looking west and this is looking north. And so you can see that this damage zone of microseismicity is my interpretation. And there was a series of surface simulations which ran east-west and were directly in line with the observational planes that I put in. So using the surface lineations, but the geometries of the planes which I constrained the microseismicity data with, that's how I got my fault planes. And again, with these two faults here, there was two faults which ran north-south in exactly the same position as the observational plane, and it just really nicely divides the data between Urchi and Chabri. Then coming back to the cross-section, so I put in the faults with the geometries from the microseismicity data, and I decided to go with the 90% volcanic fill. So I decided this because of the geological settling in the rift environment, but also I looked at examples from Tuamoya and Aluto and Ghana, and they didn't accommodate for any sedimentary deposition. So I felt a 40% sedimentary deposition was probably an over approximation, and that's why I went for the 90% to still to accommodate for just a little bit of something other than volcanic deposition. And yeah. So then coming back to the final reservoir model, which I'm hoping now we can see how I've constrained all the little bits. So here you can see those final faults, and you can see how they trend roughly east-west and roughly north-south. And they're coloured by permeability from the regional stress field modelling. So the blue is permeable, so that would suggest that there's free fluid movement between Urgia and Chabri, and it's constrained to the south by this red fault, which has been identified in deformation studies and the resistivity data as to control the reservoir, and kind of looking at it with the geochemical data. and the rest of our modelling, I think it is controlling the southern edge of the reservoir, but then there's free movement to the north, because as you can see here, the clay cap thickens to the north, which would indicate fluid movement to the north as well. So although these are modelled as impermeable, there is some reason to suggest that there's fluid movement to the north, and so there maybe isn't a regional stress field present. I mean, there's been other data to suggest a local stress field, so there was some fault plane solution data which saw strike slip faults, and that maybe is suggesting a localized fault, localized stress field. But then looking at it in depth, so there's a northerly dipping water table, and so water will start to enter from the south and enter the fault damage zone here, with heated water and geothermal fluids rising along these fault zones, and then entering this yellow reservoir region here with outflow to the north. And then these are the two wells which Corbetti Geothermal have currently planned and put in their well design trajectories, and we can see that they intersect one fault each. So I wanted to take this a little bit further to see if you could achieve any more than one fault well interaction. And from our modelling, scenarios where B1, B2, B2, B3, and A3 have a two-fault well interaction. So yeah, it's just to kind of, but they don't abide by the full design trajectory from Corbetti. And then, so for the resource assessment, I calculated the depth of thickness of the reservoir and the surface area, but the surface area is quite hard to estimate, and also I've given a value for Urgy, for Chabi, and for Corbetti as a whole, but also a maximum and a minimum for both, just to kind of incorporate the uncertainty into the data and the results. And I found that the highest value that I got was 3,070 megawatts. The mean value for the whole of Corbetti was 733 megawatts, and 236 megawatts was the lowest value that I got from my modelling. But the lowest value of 236 megawatts is still about 80 megawatts over the early exploration development plan, over 150 megawatts, which the power purchase agreement has been agreed to. So this fulfills confidence in the modelling and ensures there's a very low risk of no heat reserve. And then just to conclude, so the structural findings and kind of the fault planes at depth should hopefully make borehole planning less challenging, and incorporating the stress field modelling, hopefully drilling targets can be estimated as well. The heat source, which I've suggested, is supported by the deformation studies, and linking it with the hydrothermal network and geothermal system. I think it's a really plausible location for the heat source. And then the construction of the fault plane annual east-west one, I think, is really crucial, because it controls the reservoir to the south, and actually having a plane there is good. And then if I was to take my work a bit further, I'd say the incorporation of rainfall data would help to understand the recharge rate of the reservoir and the lifetime of the reservoir. I think that's it. Yeah, just some references there.
Thank you very much, Hannah. That was excellent. Can anyone hear me still yet?
Yeah. We can hear you.
No, that was a really interesting presentation and an amazing amount of work. I mean, those models look fantastic. Has anyone got any questions for Hannah?
Yeah, I have a question. So Hannah, I really enjoyed the talk. I think it's super interesting, all of the modelling that you've done. So you mentioned that there was a permeable fault, cross-cutting, and impermeable fault, and I wanted to know how you, or what data you used and what resources that you found to estimate that this orientation is permeable and then this one is impermeable.
Do you mean, can you still see my screen? Yeah.
Yeah, I can see your screen.
Yeah. Do you mean this this north-south trending fault and like this area here? Is that what you mean? Yeah. Sorry.
I'm talking about the blue one. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So if I go back a few slides, there's a software which is called FlatMap here, and you use it through MATLAB, and you put in just a file of just kind of like fault lineation lines, and you apply the stress field to that, to kind of the input that you're putting in, and because I put in, say, an extension, roughly 100, so roughly east-west extension, or north, south-east, north-west extension, it's showing that the lines which are the faults are most likely to dilate north-south, because when you extend, if you're in a system where you've got extension this way, faults which are like this are gonna open up, because that's where the minimum stress is. And those ones, so that's why the north-south trending fault in the final figure, the final reservoir model, is blue, because it's under this regional stress field. But I guess if you put a local stress field in, there could be reason to suggest that it's not permeable, it's impermeable. But it is thought that there is a reservoir beneath Chadwick, but it's difficult because you've got the data for Urge, so kind of the eastern, this side here, western side, sorry, to kind of confirm that there is a potential reservoir there, but because there's no data, like surface data on Chadwick, it's difficult to know whether that fault is actually permeable or impermeable, or if it is a completely compartmentalized reservoir.
Yeah, I understand. So you use the stress fields to really make that interpretation. Yeah. I guess it is kind of hard if you don't have a lot of actual field data to work with.
Yeah, exactly. I think the fault data was, some of it was from LiDAR data and some of it was verified in the field, but it is all based on that, not all of it. Obviously there is data there to support it, but it was based on interpretation and some assumptions. Yeah, Nick.
Thank you.
What was it also calibrated by the surface manifestations, and you have some geochemical data in that area as well?
Yeah, so yeah, so can you see the slide? Yeah. What was your question, Nick? Sorry, about the geochemical data.
Well, I was wondering how the geochemical data and some of the faults, there is some correlation in the Urge area.
Yeah, I'd say so, because the faults are, so I guess the geochemical data where the steaming ground is, or these pink lines here are geothermal locations from a paper, and I guess they're linear, so it would kind of support that there is a fracture there, or to kind of support the steaming ground or the geothermal surface manifestation. So it would suggest that there is a potential below energy for the reservoir. Does anybody else have any other questions? No? Oh, I can't hear you.
Hi, thanks for your presentation. Can I just ask what anyone is going to do with this next? I don't know who the developer is, but are they going to take note of what you found and plan the wells accordingly? Do you know what's going to happen now?
Yeah, so basically Corbetti Geothermal have I'm actually doing a little bit of work with them at the minute to suggest. I just go to the website to show you. So here is well pad B, which is really close. It's not actually on this fault, but because of just the scale of the map, it looks like it is. But it's really, really close to this fault. And they've asked me to kind of do a little bit of research into maybe where the fault could be moved to avoid hitting a really high permeability zone. So that's it's good to know that kind of my research has been acknowledged by them, and that they will be wanting to move the well pad, and I'm looking into doing that at the minute. Yeah.
Cool.
Gregor Bjornsson and myself and a couple of others are writing a paper with Hannah, and that will be in an update of the WGC. So it's been the abstract has been accepted for the deferred WGC, and also Corbetti are actually have been in the field last week looking at rig contractors, and they're hoping to proceed in first quarter next year.
Good.
I work as an advisor to Corbetti Geothermal, and was helping Hannah.
Well, it's good to hear they're actually going to do it, because people have been talking for so long about various prospects without any of them actually coming to fruition. So it's good that it's actually going to. It's great.
Yeah.
Well, Reykjavik Geothermal are a partner in the project that makes up Corbetti, and they're actually active in Tulamoya at the moment.
Cool.
Lucy, did you have a question? Because I couldn't hear you before.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
It was the same question as Pete, asking what's the next stage of this study, because it can't go to waste. So you've answered it. Thank you.
Good, good.
Does anyone else have any questions? Okay. Oh, Claire, are you talking?
Yeah, I was just going to say there's a question from Hester in the chat. So the question from Hester is, were the faults able to be traced from LiDAR? If so, did you hill shade the LiDAR in a certain direction to highlight these faults? And then underneath it said, assuming this is LiDAR. Is that right, Hester?
Yeah, it is like that. So the initial faults, I'll just show you. So these faults were detected from LiDAR. So the earlier faults with the pink ones, I'm not too sure how, because that's kind of really earlier data set, not the 80s, but the ISO data set is initially identified through kind of lineation algorithms on LiDAR data, and then they went out into the field to kind of verify some of the faults. So the verified ones are the ones in black. So I get, do you mean the faults which like the red fault data set which I kind of produced, or do you mean these faults?
We'll just have to wait for her to type it in, and then we can read it out.
Okay.
Oh, she just missed the last bit. Are you able to repeat it?
Oh, sorry. So the faults that the ISO interpretation faults were identified from algorithms within kind of on the LiDAR data. But do you mean these faults are the faults, the regional fault data set that I kind of came up with, they're identifiable through the LiDAR? Is that what you meant, or did you mean these faults? Sorry, is that clear?
She said yes, the first.
So the my faults, the red faults. So sorry. The faults are already identified here. So my aim was to use these faults and not go off where these faults have been identified. So if they've been identified here, then to kind of link maybe the middle bit, which they haven't identified, they haven't picked up on the LiDAR data because it's not there on the surface, but because it's not there on the surface, it's maybe, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not a fault, it's just not broken through the surface since the most recent deposit. So for example, these two, this horizontal east-west trending black lines here, you can see they're not fully overlapping, and so that they were not, because they're presuming that my interpretation is that they will be a fault, you just can't see them. So technically, the red would these ones, so they won't necessarily all be kind of shown on the LiDAR, because maybe they're not there at the surface, but my interpretation is that they are there, they just haven't broken through the most resurfacing. And your question about the multiple hill shade angle, but I didn't, I wasn't too sure how to, I actually didn't think about doing it at the time, and I said it was probably a good idea, but I wouldn't know how to do that in ArcGIS either, so that would be a good idea to do that, to see if maybe they're just, you can't see it on this map. So I thought it was a really long-winded answer. Does that answer your question? Okay, good.
If you want to see the chat, she just says, okay, thank you.
Okay, cool. Have you asked her?
Very quickly, in fact.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Now. Yep. Okay, thank you very much for your presentation.